Well, hello and welcome to Between the Sundays, this latest edition of just extending the conversation between Sundays. It feels like we need to rename the podcast today because it's been so long. It's kind of been a month or so
Between the seasons.
between the summer.
seasons.
I don't know, but summer is a busy time in ministry. There's a ton going on, and we're going to actually talk about that a little bit today. But has been a month or so. I've got Pastor Aaron.
Yes.
And I've got Garrett Snyder with me today. And so thanks to you for listening, for watching, wherever you're taking in this podcast. But there have been a lot of things going on. I think the last one that we uploaded was, 4 or 5 weeks ago. And in the interim, we've continued the sermon series that we talked about, Summer 7. We've been in this series where we're looking at the letters from Revelation 2 and Revelation 3 that John received in this revelation, and it's the words of Christ. It's red letters, and it's speaking to these 7 churches. And you had kicked off that series the last time we uploaded that. We're kind of now 4 or 5 weeks in, but we've also had a little bit of break. We're going to talk about that, but just kind of update us the series, like what stood out to you, what the series itself, why is it so meaningful? Are you enjoying it? Do you feel like our people are connecting to it? That kind of thing. I'll let Garrett. You feel like you've got something deep going, so I'll let you share first, and then Pastor Aaron.
Yeah, well, I mean, Aaron kicks it off with a bang for sure. I mean, I think anytime you mention the word revelation in church, I mean,
like an audible gasp.
Yeah. But I think the response to this series has been incredible. Honestly, even like on a spectrum of like, not even folks that are newer to us, but that have been here for a while, but also just people that are in different walks of their spiritual journey. It's been cool to see their reaction to, we've had the ability to see Aaron speak and Jeremy and Carson this past Sunday. So a few different perspectives, not only like from the letters themselves, but from the different communicators. So it's been a fun series. I think it's kind of fit well with the summer. The way it kind of laid out, we tend to do these kind of summer-long series, and they always seem to kind of flow well with what we're doing in that moment, and it's been good to see the reaction.
I think whenever you do a Revelation series, you don't know how it's going to go or how it's going to connect. I feel like, a lot of people think it's going to be more focused on the end times, but this series, what I've loved about it is even though we are talking about, the Lord is near, and it's Jesus's letters to these churches, it is super practical. And so every sermon that we've heard preached from multiple different communicators, there's been something to walk away with that is super challenging. Not only to us personally, but to us as a church. It's a letter written to a church in the region, which is now modern day Turkey, and it's a letter written to that church, but it's also a letter to our church and a letter to us personally. So I've loved that the fact that we're able to take it and there be practical steps for us in our faith in our lives. So.
That's good. I think for me, the series so far, I do agree with you. The practical nature, just people leaning in, and but we early on in the planning for this series, we talked about. I've seen this series done, or not seen the series done, but like where people look at these letters and they equate them to specific modern styles of churches. It's like, oh, that letter could go to the current seeker churches or the mainline church denominations or the liturgical, whatever. And so I think for this, we said we want to stay away from that. We want to see what is the understanding historically to that specific church, theologically, doctrinally, but then what is the application to Generations Church and to my life personally? I think in every letter so far, it's talked about what are you doing well, what could you do better, and for Jesus to challenge you that way, to confirm, hey, you're doing really well in these areas, but these are some things you could step up in. I think that's been the practical thing, because every week there's been a take home from me, me personally as the listener, as the hearer, even the weeks I've been speaking. So I think that's important. We've got a couple more weeks. We're going to end in 2 Sundays from now. And we're actually going to combine 2 of those letters, because in the middle of this series, we took a little bit of a hiatus from the series because we had a guest speaker, and then we had our Communicator Sunday on July 4th weekend. The guest speaker was not really a guest. That's a little strong to call him that, but Pastor Mark Walker, Dr. Mark Walker, he is my pastor, but he was the senior pastor of Mount Perry North. We launched our campus that became a church when he left Mount Perry North to go to Lee University, but he came in and spoke on integrity the last Sunday of June, and just challenged us really out of the story of Joseph, and how he just maintained his integrity and who he was. Really powerful message. But just quickly, I mean, what are kind of some thoughts from that message, or even some practical takeaways? I just think for all of us as we live our lives, we're always confronted with opportunities to compromise or to put in
Yeah.
situations where people don't believe the same way we believe, they don't act the way we act.
hmm
And so, what does that look like for us personally? Either one of you want to jump in? If not, I can keep talking.
Every time that I think of integrity, I think of what am I doing when no one's watching?
Mhm.
And he just did a phenomenal job at like challenging each person to, hey, take a step up in how you live your life, in living your life, to live your life with integrity
Yeah.
so you can be a testimony to others.
Yeah.
And so every time I think of integrity, that's something I strive for personally.
Sure.
But even through that message, I was like, man, I can get a lot better. He's
Yeah.
he's talking about the atheist that challenged
Yeah.
him
Yeah.
when he
college,
was in
yeah.
college. And I was like, my goodness, like I hope nobody ever has to check me like that. So like when no one's watching, but then also when people are watching that you don't may know, like
Yeah.
I need to live with higher integrity, like raise my standards of integrity. So
That's
Yeah,
good.
that was good.
Anything for you specifically?
Yeah, I mean, I think who better to speak on that than
Yeah.
him? You know, for
he's
somebody like
so
even
good.
being a pastor
Yeah.
at Mount Prayer North, but specifically now, like in the role that he has at Lee, somebody's just kind of like under such a big like kind of
Yeah.
spotlight,
Mhm.
Yeah.
and just kind of stick kind of holding firm in who you are and what you believe and being that person like when nobody's looking. Like
Yeah.
he did a fantastic job, and I think honestly it wasn't in the series that we did, but even still, it kind of like that self kind of checking
Mhm.
kind of flowed with the series a
Yeah.
little bit itself too. So it fit well.
Two things that he said that stood out to me. One, he quoted Warren Buffett, and
Mhm.
I'm paraphrasing the quote, and I may miss it just a little bit, but he said, in all the years of hiring and firing and looking for people, evaluating talent, he said, you need a person with three things: integrity, passion, and effort.
Mhm.
And he said, if they lack the first, the other two will kill you.
Mhm.
So they have to have integrity.
Yeah.
And I think for the personal challenge, like, where do I in my life maybe miss that and try to operate just on passion or effort,
Mhm.
and then the people around me from a staff standpoint, or even just the people we allow into our lives, just making sure we live with integrity, and then the other things follow and not
Mm.
overlap. And
Yeah.
then the second thing that he talked about, and I thought this was so profound, he said, integrity takes hundreds of acts or thousands of acts to build,
Mhm.
but ultimately he says you don't give it away in
Yeah.
one act. That's
Mhm.
kind of different than I've heard a lot
Yeah.
of people say, like, oh, you can lose your integrity in one moment. He says, I think it's those little tiny compromises along the
Mhm.
way, where if you just you just do a little bit of this or a little bit of that, eventually you find yourself in a place where you kind of lose
Yeah.
That part
It's
was
like the
your
idea
so
of the little
good.
white lies,
That's
like it just
exactly
continued
right.
to build, and so
That's
you're like
exactly
just
right.
in a kind of
There was a verse of scripture in the story of Joseph where he said, like, he wouldn't even stay near her. He wouldn't go and talk to
Mhm.
her because he evidently had seen something in her character or her behavior that, like, he was avoiding any, because he knew if I get in that environment, like,
Mhm.
what she's gonna do or what's gonna happen. And so I thought that was just really profound to say, like, I'm going to make sure I don't compromise even in little tiny ways along the way
Mhm.
to maintain my integrity so it doesn't become
Yeah.
this gigantic thing at the
Yeah.
end, which
That's good.
I love Pastor Mark. Now he's Dr. Walker. He's the president of a university. He'll always be Pastor Mark to me.
Mhm.
But I do, and he embodies integrity. He and
Yeah.
Udella both, and I've watched them in so many different settings, behind closed doors and out in public. Literally traveled the world with him, but man, I respect him so much, and I thought it was a perfect topic for that. He said to me on the phone in advance of the Sunday, he said, "I have a message that I genuinely want to share,"
Mhm.
and that came out. It was very, very personal. And then we jumped in on the holiday weekend to Communicator Sunday. So we normally have
It was
done this
phenomenal.
one or
Yeah, it
two
was.
times a year. Some most calendar years for the last 4 or 5 years, two times a year.
Mhm.
But we moved it to the middle of the summer this year, and we had five communicators. Some
Mhm.
churches do something similar called like 5 for 5, or whatever. And you have these five communicators that speak for 5 or 6 minutes apiece. And so we had five individuals, male, female, younger, older, that kind of thing, and they shared what was on their heart. Now, in anticipation of that day, they submit a topic.
Mhm.
Well, first of all, they agree to speak. We
Yeah.
kind of prayerfully make a
Yeah.
list and ask them to consider it. And over the years, we've had people say, "No way, no chance I
Yeah.
could do
I
that."
feel like it's always you can usually lock in three pretty
Yeah,
quick.
that's
It's the
right.
last two that are
Yeah,
just
the last two, you're to the nail. But all five of these said, "Yeah,
Mhm.
I think I can do it. I think I'm going to pray about it." Then they submit a topic,
Mhm.
and then they prayerfully work through, like, what does that topic look like, kind of fleshed out. We send them some resources to help develop that.
Mhm.
Then they write it out. Then they come and practice it here and in the building so that they get comfortable with the stage and the lights and the screens, and just to
Mhm.
make sure they're comfortable in the setting. But each of the 5 that shared this year, I thought were, and this is not to speak to anybody that's ever done it in the past,
Yeah.
because it's always a phenomenal
Yeah.
Sunday, one of
Yeah.
our highlights of the year. But I felt like these 5 different topics were just so genuine. It came out
Mhm.
of their heart, out of, their personality, but it connected in the room. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
tears, laughter, like, I mean, a ton of emotion throughout. So, you don't have to isolate one. You definitely can. Your mom was one of them. So,
Yeah.
okay, your mom
No
was your
pressure.
favorite. Other than that,
Yeah.
no, but beyond that, like, what were some of your takeaways, your thoughts from Communicator Sunday, and what it could, kind of linger for our congregation?
Man, so I've been thinking back on it, just even trying to pinpoint what might have been like every one of them was amazing. Started
Mhm.
from Ken to Chelsea Bailey
Yeah.
to Emily Donald to
Billy
Billy Bashan, and then my mom Pam White. But I mean, all of them were great. I think one of them that stuck out to me was Billy Bashan's when he talked about generosity.
Yeah.
And he connected it so well. He talked about his story of him and Cassie giving, not giving and then giving, and how God's always been faithful
Yeah.
to him. And he talked about Malachi 3, where it talks about God will open the storehouse and in the floodgates.
Yeah.
When we give and bless us. And he just did a phenomenal job of connecting giving. Giving's not an easy one to talk
Yeah.
about, and he did a phenomenal job
What
at
a
doing
lot of
it.
times too, people in the church or they think, well, the pastor preaches on
Mm.
giving, kind of in a self-serving way, like, oh, we got to
Mm.
get money into
Mhm.
the church. But Billy came from his approach and said, no, this is my life experience. Like,
Yeah.
they were struggling in a financial situation, and he called his mom, and his mom was like, well, how's your tithing?
Yeah.
She was like, once you start tithing, then you call me back. Like,
Yeah.
you're not just gonna get on the phone and whine. But he talked about it from a very personal, this is
Yeah.
a part of my relationship with God. I put God to the test, and he's shown himself faithful, which I think spoke so heavily in the room, because people were
Mhm.
like, man, that's their life experience. They don't get anything from
Yeah.
that. There's not, like, it's just what they've walked through, what they've trusted God. And I
Mhm.
thought that was a really
Mhm.
Yeah.
powerful talk.
And then you had Chelsea Bailey and my mom. Chelsea Bailey, I believe, talked about hope.
Yeah.
And my mom talked about faithfulness. And their stories, their testimonies kind of
Yeah.
were similar
Yeah.
in they experienced loss and they had grief.
Yeah.
But through that they found hope
Mhm.
and joy. But then they found God to be faithful
Yeah, that's
through
good.
all of that. And I mean, that was just moving
Yeah,
in a
it was.
moving and impactful way.
Yeah.
And so there's a couple other ones. I'm sure G has some thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I think something that comes to mind is just I remember telling a couple people that day. I think any of those could have been turned into a 30-minute sermon.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and maybe that's what's been like a little bit different. Like we've had fantastic ones in the past, but I feel like any of those could have gone on for another 20, 25
Yeah.
minutes.
Sure.
I'm not just saying it because he's producing the podcast. I don't want to mute my mic. But Pastor Connor's wife, Emily, I mean, hers was great. I mentioned not only was it just super great for the room and for that Sunday morning,
Yeah.
but like something that could even be like done for our students, our middle school and high school students and the girls and the guys in that I feel like it was great, super relatable. Everybody, like all the topics were different, like they said, but it just resonated throughout the whole room. And oftentimes with multiple people, like, multiple people were kind of connecting on each of the topics that were discussed. And it's always just so great to see people like within the church that just love being here, get on stage and share their heart.
When Emily Donald hit everybody with the finger
finger
point,
point. That's
in
what I
the
was gonna say.
middle
Yeah.
of her message, I was like, okay.
I mean,
Well, she had been.
She might start
she'd been
preaching here.
reading,
Yeah.
and kind of reading from her notes and talking, whatever.
Yeah.
But there was a moment, and maybe I don't know that everybody would understand what I mean, but there was a moment where it went from like a talk to a sermon.
Yeah.
Like they had like the anointing or whatever the word you want to call it. Like there was
Yeah.
something. My grandparents you call it like the unction. Like there was
Mhm.
something.
I
Something
feel like
and
the
she just-
floodlights
she was
came
like,
up. I
"This
think I
is
saw a dove. I mean, it was just
But it was, we've already talked about hope and faith.
Mhm.
We talked about generosity.
Yeah.
And Emily's was about insecurity.
Yeah.
And believing the lies of the enemy for her life, but
Mhm.
really trusting the word of God. What does God say about you? Who does
Mhm.
God say that you are? And
Mhm.
trusting and believing those things and allowing them to kind of lay over the things that the enemy's
Yeah.
trying to cause you to believe. And
Mhm.
it was a powerful message. And then Ken Summers kicked it
Yeah.
off. He really kind of went back. It was July 4th weekend.
Mhm.
Talked about the founding of our nation,
Yeah.
talked about the state of our country currently, and even the world. But he made a couple of interesting statements that I thought were really profound. He said, instead of looking to government,
Mhm.
it's time for the church to be the church.
Yeah.
And not to minimize or downplay. I mean, the role of government when it's done right, like it's a powerful instrument for
Mhm.
good, or can be. But man, the church, when the church is the church, ultimately that's how people are saved and healed and cared for. And so he said it's time for the church to be the church.
Yeah.
But he also turned it not just from this corporate thing of the church, he turned it personally
Mhm.
to say, like, how am I living this out? How am I embodying this? And I just thought that was really profound. Again, a lot of personal application
Mhm.
in each of the five.
Yeah.
But because it was so true to each of them, it was
Mhm.
either their story, it was something they've experienced, something they wanted to share. My brother was in town that weekend, and he leaned over to me during Ken Summers, who led it off. He was first, and he said, "Whew, you shouldn't have had him go first. This was so good." I was like, "We're gonna
Yeah,
be
just
okay."
wait.
Like I knew because I'd already heard the messages or their notes or whatever, and who they are.
Mhm.
I was like, "Just wait." And at the end, he was like, "Man, that was unbelievable."
Yeah.
So it was a great day.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And it was just a really great day. We combined, probably the last time we'll be able to do that because we filled that room
Yeah.
to capacity, but combined to one service. And we took a couple minutes right in the middle just to walk around and hug people and high five. My introvert, I gave him 2 minutes on the clock. My introvert sat down. Some
It
of
was a
them
long, it was a
immediately.
long
Yeah,
2
20
minutes.
seconds.
Some of them in 20 seconds. It was a long 2 minutes. But my extroverts, when the 2 minutes, if I gave them 20 minutes, it wouldn't have been enough. They were
Yeah,
still
yeah.
in the back, high
Yeah.
fiving.
I was in the
hugging.
other side of the room.
Yeah, I mean, there were
Yeah.
G
I was
groups
like,
forming
okay.
in the back of the room. I mean, it was
That's right.
wild.
Extroverts unite. So it was a great day. Then we jump back into the series this past Sunday. You're
Yeah.
preaching this coming Sunday,
Mhm.
and then I'll conclude the series in two weeks from now. And so I want to talk a little bit about kind of our summer series, family ministry, or summer events, family ministry, quickly, and then I want to kind of look towards the future a little bit. But we came out of camp. One of the things, like the busyness of all we're talking about, it's been really good busyness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were at camp for a couple weeks. I was there 1 week. We sent a number of students. I don't even have the final count, but a number of students and a number of leaders, maybe 60, 70 people
Yeah.
total across those weeks of camp. But just maybe a quick takeaway from just the total experience of camp for you and what it meant to our kids and leaders.
Yeah, camp's always a blast. It's always one of my favorite things that I always look forward to. One thing that just throughout the staff that was there working the camp, the leaders, the leaders have a meeting every morning that they do together, a small devotional, and just kind of kind of getting a game plan for the day. But something we mentioned every morning was that camp this year just felt different.
Yeah.
Felt like the kids were just there with a different just drive and purpose, just kind of more open, just they are ready for worship. And it was just cool to see the kids, connect. That's one of the cool things that I love that always happens is we take these kids with us, kids that are a part of this student ministry that we have here that we're with throughout the year, that just get to camp and just open up in ways that like you just would never imagine, and just see them down at the altar and worshiping and their hands raised and accepting Jesus, and it's a great time, and it's it gets hot and the days are long sometimes. This year it wasn't bad because there was a monsoon for the
Rain.
2 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, but man, it's just so much fun to spend those couple of weeks
But the
with those
kids
kids.
didn't have
and
to shower
They
because they got
didn't.
Yeah.
rained on.
They did.
I mean, there's no need to
it,
shower.
it really worked out.
That's
So,
great.
but no, I love it. It's a
Yeah,
really
that's great.
really fun opportunity and experience. So,
Well, we're big believers in camp. I mean,
Mhm.
Corey and I personally, but also just our church
Yeah.
over the years. Historically, we've sent kids to camp. We've sent workers to camp. We've worked camp personally. You guys have because
Yeah.
we believe in the power of getting away,
Mhm.
for a time. I refer to camp a lot as kind of this Mount of Transfiguration in modern day. Like you get away from the crowd, the hustle and bustle. You experience Christ in
no
a
cell
new
service.
way. Yeah, right.
No
No
cell
cell
service.
service at the top of that mountain. But you experience Christ in a new
Yeah.
way,
Yeah.
in community. And it's like, can we stay at camp? Can we,
Mhm.
and that's what Peter said to Jesus. Can we just build a couple of tents for you guys and just stay right here? He's like, no, we got to go live down the mountain. Like, we
Yeah.
got to go back. So you can't live at camp because then it wouldn't be camp.
Yeah.
But to get away for that short period of time, like God does some amazing things. It's transformational in the lives of the people that attend, and I'm thankful for that.
I believe 4 high school students were
Yeah.
called to ministry too,
Yeah.
which is coming out of that, like just to hear that after the first week was
Yeah.
just
That's great.
was incredible.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Well, we're right in the middle this week. We're shooting this now in the middle of our vacation Bible school.
Mhm.
So it's Tuesday. We kicked it off last night. Great night.
Yeah.
Pastor Madeline and her team did a phenomenal
Yeah.
job. Lots of fun. We're
Mhm.
doing it's stellar. No, we're doing a
Yeah.
theme called Stellar. I've used that joke 4 or 5 times. It always lands like that, just a little icy. But kind of the idea that Jesus is the light of the world.
Yeah.
And so in the midst of darkness and all of the other things. So it was really amazing to watch, and I'm excited to see how the rest of this week
Mhm.
plays out. My favorite thing, I think, last night, other than just the kids being excited and a lot of fun or whatever, was watching the parents at the closing, kind of the closing service, the closing moment.
Mhm.
A little short, kind of 10-minute deal. They do some worship songs. Pastor Madeline kind of wraps up the theme, Bible verse, and watching some of the parents sitting in the back and like kind of nodding along, like they were engaged too. They were
Mhm.
learning a little bit too, or seeing what their kids were experiencing. That was exciting because really that's the heart of our church.
Yeah.
Is that this is a place for every generation.
Mhm.
So we're doing something for kids Their parents are in the room. We're hosting a grandparents summit, later this fall. But just the idea, like, there's a place for everybody of
Mhm.
every age. And so, in just a few weeks, on the 30th of July,
Mhm.
we launch a brand new series called Figuring Out Family. And so, for 4 weeks, we're going to really just lean into that every family's got, just the chaos, and like even great families, whatever that cookie cutter
Yeah.
mold looks like,
Mhm.
every family's got some stuff. But ultimately, like, there's a pressure on families. And in our culture, in our community, Corey and I talked about this last night, like, there's a sense of being a little bit overwhelmed,
Yeah.
like trying to the busyness of schedule, whether you've got kids or not, you're married, you're working a couple of jobs, you're stretched in a lot of different areas. Your kids have moved out, so it's empty nesting. I mean, that's
Mhm.
not just our community, but we see it a lot in our community. And so, trying to, like, for those 4 weeks, just understand family and what
Yeah.
is God's design for the family unit in a variety of different forms. What does that look like? And really, just our heart is to serve them, to love them, to let it be life giving, and to
Mhm.
give them some hope to go, hey, okay, maybe we're not doing as bad as we think. Or if we recognize there's some things we need to change through the power of God, let's change those things so our family can be what God's
Yeah.
called us to be,
Yeah.
and really help us to live this generational faith, to personally
Mhm.
possess it and to pass it on. And so,
Yeah.
I'm excited about that. We're going to
It's gonna
kick
be
it
a good one.
off the last Sunday of July
Mhm.
with back to school prayer, because the
Mhm.
kids start on Tuesday the 1st. It's crazy. So we're going to pray over all the kids and teachers
Mhm.
and faculty, administration. And then the end of the series is August the 20th. That's going to be a big
Yes.
day for our church. It's
Yes.
Sunday Fun Day, which is always a fun day, right?
Yeah.
We got a lot of things that are going on there. But then we're also doing a ribbon cutting
Mhm.
ceremony, because we just purchased the building that we're sitting in right now, the building we've been renting since 2016.
Mhm.
We purchased the entire building. I still think people are trying to
Yeah.
grasp, like, what does that
Yeah.
mean? So
Just the
we meet in upstairs and downstairs, 25,000 square feet,
Mhm.
but there's 36,000 square feet of the building. So there's other renters, Anytime Fitness, a construction company, a retro shop, a photography studio, a nail
Mhm.
world, all that kind of stuff. And they are now renting from us. So we
Mhm.
own the entire building and the property.
Yeah.
And so we're going to do a ribbon cutting ceremony to kind of indicate and signify, hey, the Lord has brought us thus far,
Yeah.
and this is not the end. This is the
Mhm.
starting line for this next season of ministry, and just really celebrate that. I love the stories of the Old Testament, the children of Israel. Just about every time God would do something special, they would stop and build an altar,
Yep.
and they would name that place.
Mhm.
And so we're not going to change the name of our church,
Yeah.
but, like, we're going to have a day where we pause and we just kind of build an altar of remembrance, like,
Yeah.
hey, God's faithfulness has delivered us to this moment. And there have been some times over the last few years I wasn't sure, like, we get to this
Yeah,
moment,
yeah, yeah.
but man, we did, and
Yeah.
God's
Yeah.
been incredibly faithful. And I'm,
Yes,
I'm
he
excited
has.
to celebrate with our,
It's
our
gonna be
Gonna be
church
a good
family,
day.
to end that series, do the ribbon cutting, and to do it with Sunday Fun Day.
Mhm.
So it's going to be awesome. Lots of great things happening.
Yeah.
Lots of great things that have been happening. And again, every Sunday there just seems to be this building momentum of the presence of God, this incredible power of community,
Mhm.
and I'm thankful for that. Thankful for you guys, the rest of our team,
Yeah.
church family. Thankful for you watching today, listening today, wherever you may be from. Wherever you're at, if you're in the local community and you can, come check us out. Come be with us on a Sunday in a ministry environment. If not, you can tune in online every time we gather at G.Church. We love you. God bless. We'll see you next time.
See you.